we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. The obstacles that are in the path are just as much a part of the way as the smooth sailing, easy path and easy days in there. Without those obstacles coming in, then there's no reason to build up strength. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Strength Connection podcast for a very special solo episode. Appreciate you joining me. All right, so we're going to dive right into it. So exciting and busy past week since the last time I got a chance to speak with you solo here. I've had a really interesting episode that came out on the podcast, as well as one that's going to be coming out next week. I'm going to recap, as well as a lesson of connection that really was kind of perfect timing going into this week that I want to share with you. And also it was the conclusion of the NFL and the Super Bowl. So if you watch that game, I mean, it's, sports is always fun to see the competition, but it was really a clinic of grit and coaching, specifically in the second half. I think that relates so much to the strength and just kind of the words that I like to preach out on it. And the connection is watching coaches at the highest level perform, because it takes so much time and energy to put a game plan together. And when you're on the biggest stage in there, so many things don't go right in the way that you think they are. And then to be able to make adjustments and really dominate a really amazing team in the second half. Tip my hat to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and the Chiefs on that. It was incredible. So even if you're not a huge sports fan, if you're into strength and you're into any type of greatness, we're witnessing something pretty cool, I think, with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid together. So very, very cool and happy for them. It's kind of a fun to kick off a new week after seeing something like that. But anyway, going into the episode. So this past week, it is out right now. If you haven't listened to it yet, I would love you to go and do so, with Dr. Nate Zinsser. He wrote the book, The Confident Mind. I recapped it a bit last time on the solo episode, because this was one of the most deep and intricate and fulfilling conversations that I've had recently. I've been looking forward to connecting with Dr. Zinsser for quite some time. We finally got our schedules to connect together, and he is just such a genius in his own right in performance psychology, with all the work that he's done with West Point, with, top level, Super Bowl winning quarterbacks like Eli Manning, NHL All-Stars and All-Pros, as well as Olympians, as well as everybody else in between. He is just an unbelievable guy. And so we talked all about confidence, what confidence really is, how to apply it as well. And there was something just to add to it. It was something that came up this week. I talked about it on my Momentum Monday connection with my personal clientele that I work with. Is one of the parts of the system that he does in creating confidence. So if you ever read the book by James Clear, Atomic Habits, he has a great quote in there which says, "We don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems." So essentially he's saying, like, if the more robust systems, the more things you can create to put yourself in the best optimal level in order to succeed, that's where you're inevitably going to end up. And he quoted a man, Colonel Capra, in The Confident Mind, Dr. Zinsser did, who said along the similar things with training is, we don't rise to the level of the occasion, we fall back to the level of our training, talking about training cadets and training military with it. That's why they're always looking at improving their systems of, going into combat and stuff, not just on the physical side, on the tactical side, but the mental side of it. That's where Dr. Zinsser comes in. And the thing that he came out, which was so powerful, and I brought it to my crew, is the concept of cueing your conviction. So this is when you get into the stakes, when you get into your training, when you get into the moment, when you want to be most confident. It's not just about trying to conjure this feeling. There's a system that you can put in to get yourself into that feeling. And the first thing to do is cue your conviction, which is have a short, powerful statement that you verbally make. So if you ever saw the movie For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, when he was the baseball pitcher, he's a veteran pitcher, it's a decent movie, but he does something, and he references it in the book, where he says, cue the mechanism. And then all of the fans that are yelling at him in the away crowd, everything starts to go completely quiet, and you hear it and you see it in the movie, where he's getting himself into that mental zone where he sees nothing else besides the batter and the home plate. And he says it, cue the mechanism. So here he says, cue your, it's a short, powerful statement. If you remember Laurie Hernandez from the 2016 Olympics, when she went onto her gold medal run on the balance beam, you could actually read her lips say, "I got this," before a 50 million person viewing crowd and thousands in the audience going for the gold medal at like 15 years old at the time. She had everybody say, "Oh my gosh, she has such this confidence." It's like going back, it's like, oh no, she has a good system of getting confidence. And it starts with cueing the conviction. So what I asked my clientele to do is, what is their cue? What is their short, powerful statement to make? And it's something that I invite you to look at as well. First off, I would say go get the book, The Confident Mind, and dive into it. It's an incredible book. But getting into the practical application getting into the practical application of it, cue your conviction, start your system with that short, powerful statement. Thought that was so cool. So that's out there now. And then next week, I'm going to be releasing an episode I did with Dr. Reid Gorman. Dr. Ray is a physical therapist and a strength coach from Engage Movement. That's his business. And he's really developed a programming retention model of working with people from infusing really the clinical work of physical therapy and the fitness side. This is something that was a deep passion of mine for a while. I worked with a company here in New York at orthopedics and bridging that gap between rehab and getting back into mainstream fitness. And it's always the thing that I think that the industry as fitness should go into more, is bridging these gaps together. And Dr. Ray is one of those guys that's leading from the front with it. So in our conversation, talked about how he got into physical therapy, really saw the holes in a lot of the insurance-based work that he was doing. And then he built his own cash-based business to eventually getting him to where he is now, which is building a business of not just working in person in physical therapy, but also as an online-based coach as well, and putting those two things together. The way that he's done it and the message that he has was really interesting. I was really curious about how he built this up, the feedback that he was getting on this particular model of working with people, getting out of physical therapy and getting into more mainstream work, and how he retains and keeps people that he's working with. So I went through all these details with it. It was really a cool conversation to have. And I was really appreciative for Dr. Reid of taking his time and talking to me about this. So that's going to be out going into early next week after this podcast is released. So you can take a look and tune into that. So last thing I'll go over here in this episode I wanted to dive into is one lesson of connection, which was there's always a way. You just have to find it. This was a really powerful episode I did with Danny Sawaya from early on when I first started the Strength Connection podcast. And Danny was one of the guys I wanted to talk to because we had a kinship in the work that we've done with Strong First and kettlebell coaching. And I heard about a story of what he did during the pandemic to keep his gym afloat, keep his staff, on payroll, and still get his members what he needed to. So I was curious to talk to him about it. And we've dove into that. And what Danny did was, during the height of the COVID pandemic, when everything was shut down, he was in Arizona at the time, and they could not go indoors to do anything regardless with fitness. But what they could do is they could do stuff outdoors. And what Danny saw, he looked at, he had an open space right next to his gym, which was an open lot. And he created the entire floor plan of the gym inside and created it outside. So it was still 6 feet apart. It was still following all the provisions that were required, with the pandemic, but he just opened up his entire gym, just got a tarp and kind of put it over the top for weather, and was able to keep his gym afloat. And he was able to keep his staff and his trainers going in there so they could still work. He was able to still have his membership come in and get what they needed to done. And his business actually excelled and built during that time because so many other gyms just decided to just pack it in at that moment. And it was just, the lesson I got from it is just, there is always a way. It might not be the first thing that you see. It might not be the second thing that you see, but regardless of what's going on and what you need to do, there's always a way. Necessity is the mother of all inventions. And it was such an interesting example that Danny brought to it. But this also kind of spinned into a lot of what happened over the past week, personally, myself going through training that I wanted to share with you here. So I've been dealing with a injury which has been very painful in my wrist over the last couple months. So at the end of 2022, just doing a workout, I think it was like a tendon sheath rollover type thing where I heard just a very nasty snap go on in my wrist. And right away, it was painful before. I had this happen a long time ago. And all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, like, are you kidding me? Like everything was going really well. Everything was doing good. Now I've got to deal with this bullshit. And realized there was no, crazy. I knew that wasn't broken. I know it wasn't any kind of structural damage in it, but it was painful. And my first thought was like, all right, well, I'm just going to push through it. I'll push through it. And then anything that I was resting weight on my wrist was just painful. I was feeling it in my wrist, in my hand, and I'm like, okay, like I can't do this. And I was just in a groove of just a lot of good things happening in my physical training. I was feeling really strong. My conditioning was getting back up. Like I was really feeling that push. And now all of a sudden there's a chink in the armor. And now I'm like, crap. I'm like, what am I going to do? And it was a moment like I really, like, it was not feeling good. Like I really kind of mentally got into like the gutter. I didn't feel like doing anything, was just kind of feeling like that low and kind of depressed feel, because the things that I wanted to do, the things that I wanted to push on, I just physically couldn't do. And in my own mind, I was like, well, just gut through it, just get through it. And then I was like, no, this is a bad idea. So eventually I was like, all right, well, what can you do? I was like, all right, well, swings didn't feel too bad. That pull motion felt okay. All right, I couldn't do a back squat that I was working with right now because of that wrist extension. It just wasn't feeling good. And it was, changing up my mentality. All right, I went into a Zinsser squat. I actually fell in love with the Zinsser squat during the time. So the point being is that this is like 8 weeks of finagling and adjusting training over this time till eventually this week, finally getting back into a 28 kilogram bell. I rested it on my arm and I didn't feel that pain. I was able to get a full workout back of resting that bell on my wrist and it felt fine. So the point being is that regardless of what's happening in time, this too shall pass. These shitty things pop up and it's so easy. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been an athlete. I've been a strength athlete and, a proponent of health and fitness for decades. Still, even with that discipline that I built up, still that time, I had this mental feeling of like, I don't fucking feel like doing anything. Like you just get in that mindset of like, everything feels like it's got resistance on it. And all you want to do sometimes is just curl up and just not do shit. Just be weighted out and be like, eventually I'll get to a point, this will go over and I'll just, rest it for the time and I'll just not do anything. And then when it comes back in, then I'll get back into the groove. How many times do we think of that, right? But no, what I changed up is I was like, there's a way to still progress in something, even if it's not what I was aiming at the moment, there's still a way that I can still push forward. I can still do something during that time. And sure enough, got through it. And now I'm feeling a lot better going through that. But I think the big point behind it is that there's always going to be times when your mentality goes to shit or these injuries or obstacles and things like that pop up. There's never going to be that point where everything is so smooth sailing and everything's in a perfect order that you're not going to have resistance. And even if that time does come up, even for a moment, it's going to be so short before something else gets thrown into the mix that throws you off your game that you're eventually going to be having to deal with something else. Like you have those short moments, maybe like a day where everything feels like it lines up. But the reality is that the obstacles that are in the path are just as much a part of the way as the smooth sailing, easy path and easy days in there. So that's, one of my favorite books by Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle's the Way. It's not part of the way, it is the way. Like actually going through it, this is just a part of it as anything. Stephen Pressfield calls it the resistance, regardless of how many books that you write, how articulate you are, there's always going to be that resistance to it. You just have to find a way, and you have to find a new way sometimes, a way that maybe is not what you want to do, or maybe doesn't feel so great, but you still walk it down and then you're stronger for it. So as I look back, this is just another example personally in my life that I can look back and being so grateful that during this time, I was still getting other stuff done. I could still do things. I can work on, things that maybe I didn't work on a little bit before, like, my kettlebell swing. I was working on that a bit and that felt okay. And I still kept my conditioning up. I still kept my foundation set. I did some other things with pressing. I challenged myself in working on some other movements and going into something like a Zinsser squat, which I learned before, never really, put any effort and stock into it, but it was something that felt okay, actually worked on it. And now it's one of my favorite things to work on and actually really build and improve. So you never know where these things will pop up and what you'll find in these different avenues. And so it all comes with just, you got to find a way. I love the experience and the story that Danny told about, building the gym. And this, with me going through this wrist injury, this was another lesson of this connection of just being like, you got to find a freaking way, just figure it out. So if you're going through anything, if you are in one of those zones where maybe you had an injury pop up that you weren't expecting, or there's something else that's going on in life and it threw a wrench in the plans that you had, the easy first initial thought many times is to just shut it down or just rest it or just wait it out or find another way, figure it out, figure something else out. When you go into that mindset, you find those things that really make such a difference in the long run. It gives another example of how much grit and how much strength that you really have in your body. Without those resistance, without those obstacles coming in, then there's no reason to build up strength, because everything's so smooth sailing. These are things that are part of life. They're part of what happens. And I can look back and be grateful for having this ailment, having this issue going in, and hopefully it doesn't happen again. But if it does, this is another reference point that's in the bank that you can pull from. Okay. So I will leave the episode at that. Appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much. Again, please go back, listen to Dr. Zinsser's episode. It was amazing. Check out Ray when it comes out later this week. And remember that there's always a way. Just got to find it. Awesome. Appreciate you guys. Love you so much. Talk to y'all really soon. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.